What's up, guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Brandon Smith. So the case I will be discussing today, I have always felt a particular connection to, and the main reason I feel as such is because it takes place on my birthday. So sit back, grab yourself a sugar-free Red Bull, and let me tell you about the morning an itty-bitty Brandon went from 7 years old to 8. Let's get into it. The day is Sunday, June 7th, 1992. The song Jump by American rap duo Criss Cross is #1 on the Billboard charts. What? The film Patriot Games, starring Harrison Ford, is #1 at the box office. And today, American tennis player Jim Courier will defeat Peter Korda in straight sets to win the men's singles title at the 96th edition of the French Open in Paris, France. Worlds away across the Atlantic Ocean in Springfield, Missouri, 19-year-old Suzanne Streeter and 18-year-old Stacy McCall are reveling in the jubilation of successfully graduating high school at a local house party. However, with big plans on the horizon later that day, the two decide to call it on the celebration in the early morning hours. They head back to Suzanne's home to spend the night. Streeter lives alone with her mother, Sherrill Levitt, so lodging for an extra guest shouldn't be an issue. After arriving at the Delmar Street address, Suzanne and Stacy park their respective cars in front of the property and head into the home. What happens after that is still unknown, as all three women will disappear in just a matter of hours, never to be seen again. This day in mystery. Saturday, June 6, 1992, in Springfield, Missouri, is hot and pristine. With a daytime high of 28 degrees Celsius, spring is bearing down on residents of the Show Me State. Show me 7, I'll show you 8. One of the Missourians basking in the warmth that day is 18-year-old Stacy McCall. The young lady, who is described as beautiful and kind, Stacy has just graduated from Kickapoo High School. Also attending the graduation ceremony that day is McCall's good friend, 19-year-old Suzanne Streeter. Equally as beautiful and equally as kind as her classmate, the young lady referred to as Suzie by friends and family alike is described as a free spirit with a soft spot for those in need. Cheering the high school seniors on from the bleachers of Hammond's Student Center is Suzie Streeter's mom, Sherrill Levitt. 47 years young, Levitt is currently working as a cosmetologist at a local salon. The single mother is described as extremely hardworking and being very close to her daughter. At 6 p.m., Suzie and her mother, Sherrill, leave the commencement grounds. Stacy also leaves the event at a similar time, departing with her own family, who are also in attendance. At 7:11 p.m., Streeter and Levitt attend a local restaurant for a post-graduation dinner. At 7:47 p.m., daughter and mother depart the restaurant, bound for separate locations. Levitt tells Streeter to be safe as Suzie is headed out on the town. She tells her mom that she will, and the two go their separate ways from the eatery parking lot. At 8:23 p.m., Suzie arrives at the home of her best friend, Janelle Kirby. Stacy McCall is already at the residence. Janelle lives in Battlefield, 16 kilometers southwest of Springfield. The plan is to leave their vehicles at the residence and depart early in the morning for a water park in Branson, 70 kilometers due south of Kirby's home. However, in addition to Stacy and Suzie, Janelle has also graduated high school earlier that day, and her relatives from all across the country are in town for the event, and unbeknownst to Kirby, The strong majority of them are spending the night at her house, and with the house now overly occupied, the plans may have to change. But this is a concern for a later time, and right now, fun is the only agenda. And at 9 p.m., Suzie leaves her Ford Escort parked behind Stacy's Toyota Corolla in front of Janelle's house, and the troop heads out for a night of revelry. Meanwhile, back in Springfield, Sherrill Levitt is spending a quiet Saturday night home alone. At 10:23 p.m., she receives a call from a friend. Sherrill tells her gal pal that she plans on watching a little bit of Saturday Night Live after she finishes painting an armoire and hanging a wallpaper border. The friend wishes Levitt good luck and ends the call. A little after Sherrill puts down the telephone, Stacy picks one up. At 10:30 p.m., she telephones her mother Janice and informs the woman of her sleeping arrangements for the evening. The younger McCall tells the elder McCall that she will be spending the night at Kirby's house. Janice thanks Stacy for the update. At 11:53 p.m., Janelle, Suzie, and Stacy arrive at the home of Michelle Given on the east side of Springfield. Given is throwing a graduation party, and the trio are just 3 of many teenagers attending the event. At some point in the night, Janelle, Suzie, and Stacy determine that spending the night at the cramped Kirby household is just not feasible. They still want to attend the water park the next day, but decide that Streeter and McCall would be better served bunking at Suzie's house. Besides, Streeter has just recently purchased a king-size waterbed, and the 2 teenagers will have plenty of room in the oversized billet. In the early morning hours of Sunday, June 7th, the crowd at the Given household is becoming unruly. Numerous neighbors have reported the festivities to police. As such, at 1:50 a.m., authorities respond to the East Hanover Street residents and break up the party. Suzie and Stacy depart amongst the mob, and with a newly devised plan in mind, they head for Battlefield to retrieve their vehicles. At 2:25 a.m., they arrive at the Kirby household. Streeter and McCall briefly rediscuss the plans for later that morning with Kirby before bidding adieu to their no longer host. In separate vehicles, Suzie and Stacy navigate the 15-minute journey from Battlefield to Springfield. Tired from hours of celebrating, but eager with anticipation for the fun to come, the newly minted graduates arrive at 1717 Delmar Street at 2:42 a.m. Quiet so as not to disturb the presumably sleeping Sherrill, Suzie and Stacy creep into the house silently, closing the door behind them. As the sun rises over the Ozark state, the visiting extended Kirby family, including Janelle, begin to stir. The plan had been established earlier that morning. Once Suzie and Stacy woke up, they would call Janelle and head to the water park. Kirby is eager to receive the call, as she's been very much looking forward to the outing. However, as the hours pass, there is no word from either Streeter or McCall. Tired of waiting, Janelle calls her boyfriend Mike Henson for a ride, and within minutes, the 2 are on their way to the Levitt household in search of answers. When they arrive at the property, they see all 3 vehicles parked bumper to bumper in the semicircular driveway. As they come upon the front porch, shards of glass reveal themselves as the sun catches their reflection. A lampshade adorning the house is visibly shattered, but the light bulb itself remains intact. Seeing the danger in the exposed glass, Mike and Janelle sweep the fragmented debris through the cracks of the porch. With the glass disposed of, they knock on the door. No answer. They ring the doorbell. Silence from within the house. Janelle reaches for the door handle and finds it unlocked. The two enter the home. Inside, the couple find the family's Yorkshire Terrier. The usually friendly dog named Cinnamon is visibly agitated. The canine bounces nervously around the house while remaining close to the two and leaping at the duo's knees in an effort to be held. Janelle and Mike fan out and explore the property. They soon determine that Suzie, Stacy, Sherrill, or anyone else for that matter, is definitely not inside or outside of the house. When they reconvene in the kitchen to discuss their findings, the phone rings. Janelle, thinking it may be one of the missing women, answers the call. A male voice on the other end makes lewd sexual comments towards the teenager. Kirby asks the man who he is, but the inquiry does nothing to temper the caller's offensive nature. Janelle hangs up. The phone immediately rings again. Kirby answers and is again met with more filthy talk from the same man. She hangs up once more. At a loss for answers, Janelle and Mike leave the house at 1717 Delmar Street to search the surrounding area. While the couple scours the streets at the McCall residence, Janice hasn't spoken with her daughter for over 12 hours. With midday approaching, she calls the Kirby household in search of her daughter. Janelle's sister answers the phone. The worried mom shouts, "Let me talk to Stacy," at the confused sister. "Stacy didn't stay here," she replies. Not content with the answer, Janice fires back. "Yes, she did. She called me last night and told me she was staying there." She was supposed to, the younger Kirby explains, but all my relatives are staying here and there was no room, so they went to Suzie's house. Miss McCall apologizes for snapping and thanks the young woman for the information. Immediately afterwards, she places a call to the Streeter household. There is no answer. She leaves a message. She waits a few hours and calls back. She leaves another message, and another message. Her voice on the answering machine is becoming more and more frantic as time goes on. In the final commission, her frustration is so overwhelming that the words are almost indiscernible. A family friend of the McCalls, who has become aware of Stacy's emerging missing status, alerts the apoplectic mother that her daughter's car is parked in front of 1717 Delmar Street. Janice travels to the location. After gaining access to the home, she searches for a source of light inside of the pitch black house. Miss McCall finds a table lamp in the living room and switches it on. Clearly, no one is home. She does find 3 purses lined up neatly inside of the dwelling. In the bathroom, Janice finds dirty washcloths used to remove makeup. In Sherrill's bedroom, she finds an unmade bed, lighters, and a pack of cigarettes, amongst other things. In Suzie's bedroom, she also finds an unmade bed, lighters, and a pack of cigarettes. Draped neatly over the headboard are her daughter's articles of clothing from the previous night. At a loss to understand why the home contains all of the missing woman's possessions but none of the missing women, the concerned mom decides to call the police to file a missing persons report. At 2:50 a.m. on Monday, June 8th, report number 920169 is cataloged. As Janice McCall sits alone in a dimly lit living room, she notices a light blinking on the answering machine of the phone she has just previously used to summon the authorities. Desperate for answers to any clue as to where her daughter is, she presses play. A strange audio recording comes out of the machine. Unsure of what to make of the voicemail, Janice seeks to replay the message, but inadvertently she deletes the transmission. police arrive and find Janice McCall vainly trying to restore the message. She tells the officers what she can remember regarding the correspondence. Police are very interested and believe the message may have contained a clue in regards to the woman's whereabouts. However, nothing can be done to restore the transmission. Investigators later determine that the voicemail was not related to the prank calls Janelle had received earlier. Janice provides the authorities with what she knows thus far. Janelle Kirby and Mike Henson are also subsequently interviewed. Kirby is of particular help to investigators because she is the last known person to have seen both Suzie Streeter and Stacy McCall. The house at 1717 Delmar Street is swept for clues, and police can find no signs of a struggle or biological evidence to indicate a crime took place. However, the current state of the believed crime scene is anything but undisturbed. After interviewing witnesses, authorities determined that a total of 18 people had been through the house after the trio was last known to be there. A few of the tamperers even admit to cleaning up a bit, emptying ashtrays, closing windows, and tidying up dishes. Investigators become particularly upset when they learn that Mike and Janice had previously swept away the glass shards from the broken house lamp, believing that all of these well-meaning acts of kindness may have also inadvertently compromised potential evidence. Police believe that Sherrill Levitt was alive and well on the morning of June 7th, citing the slept in bed as conclusive evidence of this fact. They also believe that Suzie and Stacy were also alive and well in the house on the morning of June 7th, citing the existence of the two purses on location as evidence of this fact. However, what became of the three after this is unknown. A neighbor on Delmar Street tells police that his car was stolen the same night of the disappearance. However, it is found days later and determined not to be connected to the case. A waitress at Sherrill's favorite restaurant tells investigators that she had seen the three women during her shift on the morning of June 7th at 2 a.m. Yet, when investigators interview other people who had been in the same restaurant that same morning, not one of them reports seeing any of the women. On June 16th, 9 days after the trio's disappearance, a woman living in a neighborhood about a mile away from Suzie and Sherrill tells investigators that at 6:45 on the morning of June 7th, she saw a van being driven by Suzie Streeter. The woman behind the wheel appeared to have been crying heavily. The eyewitness says that in addition to the sighting, she also heard a man's voice coming from the van telling Suzie not to do anything stupid. When police asked the woman why she was only coming forward now, she tells investigators that she had only recently saw a Springfield 3 missing persons poster, and immediately she recognized Suzie as the driver of the van. Authorities believe the tip may be credible and go as far as purchasing an identical van to the one the witness had described. They paint it the same color and display it outside of the Springfield police station with a sign beside it imploring people to come forward if they recognize the vehicle. Later that year, the case is featured on the television show America's Most Wanted. A man phones the program's hotline with information about the women's disappearances. The call is disconnected when the show's switchboard operator attempts to link up with Springfield investigators. However, with what the caller was able to relay in the call, police say the man has prime knowledge of the abductions and they publicly appeal for the man to contact them. He never does. Thousands upon thousands of tips pour in. Police research each and every lead with varying success. Search warrants are issued, probes and excavations are conducted, but no trace of Sherrill Levitt, Suzanne Streeter, and Stacy McCall are found. After just the most preliminary of investigations, police are certain of one thing: the women did not choose to leave on their own. As such, since the authorities then had to believe that the women were abducted, they were desperate to find the abductor. One particular person of interest was found very close to home. In the months before her disappearance, Suzie had been renting an apartment with a man 9 years her senior, named Bart. Bart was Suzie Streeter's brother and Sherrill Levitt's son. Bart Streeter had a serious substance abuse problem. He struggled with alcohol, and compounding the issue, when Bart drank, he became confrontational and violent. On one particular night, when the Streeter siblings were sharing an apartment, a drunk Bart screamed at Suzie before finally throwing a fork at his sister in anger. For the younger Streeter, this was the final straw in the contemptuous cohabitation. Suzie moved back in with Sherrill the following day. Reportedly, Bart was angry at his sister for skipping out on the rent and angry at his mother for allowing her to do so by taking her in. When police asked Bart where he was on the morning of his mother and sister's disappearance, he told them that he had spent the evening of June 6th drinking to excess and spent the morning of June 7th in a state of blackout unconsciousness on his couch. The story is later confirmed by his girlfriend and a neighbor. Not satisfied with the easy alibis, detectives ask Bart to take a polygraph test. He agrees and passes the examination with flying colors. Police officially clear him as a suspect immediately thereafter. So with a family member ruled out, police next considered the other relation, romance. Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy were all not currently involved in a relationship. However, Suzie did have an ex-boyfriend that investigators were particularly keen in talking to, a man named Dustin Rekla. Streeter had broken up with Rekla months prior when she discovered that her boyfriend was part of a grave robbing team. Dustin and his pilfering accomplices would break into mausoleums, rob the deceased of their worldly possessions, including their gold teeth, before finally turning over the ill-gotten gains to pawn shops throughout the area for a profit. After learning about her boyfriend's nefarious scheme, Suzie provided authorities with information that helped them charge Dustin with theft and vandalism. Police wondered if there could be a connection between Streeter's forthcomings and her disappearance. One of the men on the grave robbing team is a man named Mike Clay. When police visit Clay's house to question he and Rekla about the Springfield Three's disappearance, they are unnerved at what they discover inside the property. In the living room of the home, they find a makeshift altar with an image of a pentagram, candles, and an animal's skull. When they speak with Dustin and Mike, the latter remarks to authorities that he hopes the three women are dead. Police are shocked by the statement. However, in a subsequent interview, Clay clarifies his remarks, saying that he only said what he said because of a particular disdain for the officer who had been asking the questions. Mike and Dustin both deny having anything to do with the Springfield women going missing, and detectives have yet to find any evidence linking either of the two to the disappearance of Suzie Streeter, Sherrill Levitt, or Stacy McCall. With no evidence tying anybody directly in the lives of the missing women to their disappearance, police were forced to look further onto the peripheries. In 1997, a man named Robert Craig Cox catapults himself directly onto the investigators' radar. In 1985, Cox, an active military serviceman, pleads guilty to kidnapping and assault with a deadly weapon and is sentenced to 9 years in prison. As such, he was also dishonorably discharged from the Army. He serves just under 3 years in jail. Almost immediately after his release in 1988, Robert is convicted and sentenced to death for the 1978 murder of Sharon Zellers. However, shortly thereafter, in 1989, in an unbelievably rare ruling, the conviction and sentence is overturned due to lack of evidence. After his release, Robert Cox moves to Springfield, Missouri, where coincidentally, he gets a job working for none other than Stacy McCall's father at a car dealership. Just after the women go missing, Robert moves from Missouri to Texas. Whilst there, he is arrested for aggravated robbery, and it is during this time in custody that Cox requests to be interviewed by a local reporter. In the sit-down, Robert announces that he believes that the Springfield Three are dead and buried. He also says whomever killed them was someone who knew what they were doing, and as such, their bodies would never be recovered. Cox had actually been previously interviewed by police in the days following the women's disappearance. When police asked Robert where he was on the morning of June 7th, he told investigators that he was with his girlfriend at church. His girlfriend corroborated the story at the time. However, she later recanted her statement and said that Cox had asked her to say that he was with her in the church when he was in fact not. Robert then changed his story and stated that he was at the home of his parents on the morning of the disappearance. His parents confirm this new alleged alibi and continue to stand by it. With all of these conflicting statements and his lengthy criminal background, police definitely have reason to believe that Cox could be responsible for Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy going missing, especially on the heels of his controversial jailhouse interview. However, authorities also wondered if Robert truly did have information regarding the case, or if he was merely seeking notoriety for the alleged murders by issuing false statements. Police have never found any evidence conclusively tying Robert Cox to the disappearance, and his involvement remains debatable. For his part, Cox has stated on numerous occasions that he would disclose what really happened to the three women after his mother passes away. She is currently 87 years old. All right, so what do I think happened? The story of Sherrill Levitt, Suzanne Streeter, and Stacy McCall is tremendously sad and troubling to think about. When I talk about one person going missing is scary enough, but the idea that three individuals could all go missing at the same time is particularly terrifying. Before I launch into the theories, I just want to issue a brief disclaimer. The timeline that I outlined at the beginning of this story is by no means the absolute gospel establishment of detail. Many different times exist for the particular events that I touched on. Different timelines in different articles vary slightly from report to report. What I tried to do is present an aggregate account of times in order to create an understanding of the generally accepted trajectory of June 6th and 7th, 1992. Additionally, I found numerous timelines that include numerous happenings outside the scope of factually supported evidence. I was purposeful in admitting these events from the timeline that I presented because they have never been verified by police. All right, so with that out of the way, let's talk theories. Well, actually, first, I'd like to touch on a few minor details of this case and give you my perspective. A lot has been made of the phone call and voicemail germane to this case. And for my part, I don't think either callers, separate or the same, had anything to do with the disappearance of the Springfield Three. Regarding the calls that Janelle Kirby received, if this person was responsible for abducting the women, he would have to be watching the house just a matter of hours afterwards, waiting for someone to enter the house, then returning to his place of residence and placing a call to the home. Remember, this was before the time of cell phones, and I just don't see it. Or was he calling the house throughout the day and just happened to call when Janelle and Mike happened upon the scene? Again, I just don't see it. Why didn't he call again after the initial 2 calls? What was the point? If he was calling as a matter of taunting, he really didn't get his point across, and he never made contact again. No, I think the call was just simply an ill-timed prank call, nothing more. Now, for the voicemail that Janice Kirby played, I have a similar mindset. We know that Janice listened to the message. We know that she described the details of the voicemail to the police, and the authorities were of the mind that the call could have been a clue to the girl's whereabouts. But I just don't think so. While I would love to know the details of the call, unfortunately, nothing extra has ever been released. Heck, we don't even know what the message was about. And I have to believe if the voicemail was as important as investigators once thought, they would have released more information about the call, or even Janice would have. I mean, we're 30 years out and we still have no idea what the caller said, who the caller was, or said they were. I believe that the phone calls and voicemail are nothing more than a cryptic red herring that provides easy suspense in retelling this story, but are unnecessary in the actual facts of the case. All right, speed round time. Are you ready? Here we go. I think the neighbor who saw the woman driving the van and heard a man's voice saying not to do anything stupid is absolutely full of baloney. The logistics of this sighting and hearing are absolute nonsense. The waitress in Cheryl's favorite restaurant, just as unreliable, considering no one else witnessed this sighting in a semi-crowded dining establishment. And finally, the America's Most Wanted caller could be legit, but I think since he never made contact again, probably not involved. Just wanted to get that off my chest. Thanks for listening. All right, now for the real suspects. And with that, I want to start with Suzie's brother and Cheryl's son, Bart Streeter. I don't think he had anything to do with his sister and mom's disappearance. I actually feel really sorry for Bart. When you see him in interviews, his pain and grief is apparent. At the time of the trio's disappearance, Bart was a troubled soul who was struggling with addiction. However, I just don't see a motive for making the women disappear. He had nothing to gain and plenty to lose if his mother, sister, and her friend came up missing. He would naturally be a suspect. Bart says that he truly regrets that he never got the chance to make up with his sister or his mom before they went missing. And I believe him. And as such, I'm ruling him out. Next, let's talk about Suzie's former boyfriend, Dustin Rekla, and his grave-robbing associate, Mike Clay. Everything that I read about these two was absolutely loathsome. They were true lowlifes who violated the dead in absolutely atrocious ways that I will not discuss here. However, in spite of their repugnant behavior, I don't believe they had anything to do with the women's disappearance. Here's why. I was never able to pinpoint either Dustin Reckler or Mike Clay's exact age despite my best efforts. However, all reports indicate that they were approximately Suzie Streeter's age. So let's say 18, 19, or 20 years old. Now, when I was 19 years old, I was already in university. I was working hard and thriving in a very difficult academic program. And just the same, I was a moron. I couldn't imagine myself at this age pulling off a virtually flawless crime, abducting 3 adults while leaving behind almost no evidence. And if one or more of my similarly aged chucklehead friends was involved, yeah, there's no chance we were getting away with it or keeping that secret for any amount of time, let alone 30 plus years. Not happening. So I'm ruling this clown, these clowns, and all of these clowns fully out. And finally, last but not least, we have Robert Craigs Cox. This man is a convicted felon. He has been suspected in numerous assaults and prosecuted for a murder that he more than likely committed. It truly seems that wherever Robert Cox goes, bad things happen to innocent people, women in particular. So with all that being said, why do I still believe that he had nothing to do with the disappearance of Suzie Streeter, Sherrill Levitt, and Stacy McCall? A lot has been made of the fact that Robert Cox worked for Stacy McCall's father. Plenty of people suspect that as such, he at some point had contact with Stacy McCall and became infatuated with the pretty teenager, and her abduction was the manifestation of this obsession, with Suzie and Sherrill just collateral damage. Now, is this possible? Of course. However, I can't pair a timeline with this motivation that works. Let's try to make it work. So, Robert Cox crosses paths with Stacy McCall on the evening of June 6th or the morning of June 7th. Okay, so far it's reasonable. They were living in the same town after all. Now he follows her throughout the night into the morning, or just happens to come across the young woman as she is arriving at her friend's house. Okay, I guess I could still see this scenario playing out. Then he waits some amount of time for the 2 women to enter the property, and later enters the house, abducting 3 women just to have his way with the object of his desire. Now that I just can't see. Bad people definitely do bad things. However, human beings, especially serial killers, are mostly creatures of habit. Robert Cox's criminal history indicates that he is definitely of this characteristic. He strikes with impunity and attacks with brutality. I don't think he has the patience nor restraint to pull off a crime this devoid of his modus operandi. So while I do think he is the most likely candidate of all named suspects in this case, I'm still going to rule him out. So now that I've ruled out all of my suspects, what do I have left? Well, my theory starts with a police report from the morning of June 7th. At 1:30 a.m., an elderly woman enters into her kitchen in search of a glass of water. As she does, her dog starts barking at a back patio door. This brings her attention to the direction of the alert, and she sees a tall, lanky figure adorned in a baseball cap peering into the window of one of her neighbors. Hoping to scare off the peeping Tom, she switches on an exterior light, and the prowler skulks away. This woman lived 9 doors down from Sherrill and Suzie. We know that Streeter and McCall would be arriving in this general vicinity just over an hour later. What is the chance that an unrelated prowler was active in the area of an abduction at almost the exact same time? I think less likely than not. Now, a lot has been made of the belief that multiple people must be involved in the abduction of the Springfield Three, since just one individual could never abduct three people. But I'm not so sure. Unless presented with these life and death scenarios, the fact of the matter is, none of us truly know how exactly we would behave. And I hope for all of our sakes that we are never faced with such a dilemma. But for the sake of argument, let's imagine a scenario where someone breaks into our house. They point a gun at a loved one and tell you to follow their instructions. I don't know about you, but even if it's against my best interest, which, just for the record, statistically, it is, I'm still probably going to do it. Emotion can take over in these situations, and doing what you can to protect the well-being of your friend, daughter, or mother becomes your paramount consideration. As such, I believe that on the morning of June 7th, a prowler has moved down Delmar Street and comes onto the lot of 1717. He spies two teenagers getting ready for bed through the pane of a window. As they flick off the light and retire for the morning, the man's perversion desires more. He creeps to the front door and finds it unlocked. Overtired and anxious, Suzie has forgotten to lock the egress. The peeping Tom is overcome with lust and doesn't even fully realize where his depravity is leading him in the moment as he lurks down the hallway in the direction of the girls behind the window. When he opens a corridor door, the sound jumps Stacy out of her slumber, and she shouts at the intruder. Alarm sweeps over the property. Suzie rises, and a now fully awake Sherrill leaves her bed and bolts in the direction of the clamor. Down the hallway, she sees a man with a gun pointed into her daughter's bedroom. The intruder turns his attention to Levitt. "Do what I say, or I'll shoot them both," he says. Sherrill, aghast at the developing situation, agrees to comply. The man tells the three women that they are to come with him. He ushers the two teenagers in front of him and orders them to link arms with the older woman at the breadth of the vestibule. He directs the trio out of the dwelling, but not before telling them if one runs, two die. A member of the collective overextends the front door. In doing so, it collides with a nearby lampshade, breaking the adornment into pieces. The accompanying crash worries the captor, and he demands the pace be quickened. The terrified trio are ordered down the street to an awaiting vehicle. The abductor tells Sherrill to sit in the driver's seat and Stacy to sit in the passenger seat. He pushes Suzie into the vehicle and slides beside her, never removing the sightline of the pistol from her head. From the back seat, he barks directions at Levitt. Fearing for her hostage daughter, Sherrill does as she is told and steers the vehicle through the open Springfield streets. Far away from the bustle of the city now, in the rural seclusion of his domain, the man walks the Springfield Three into his home. The custodian, fully alone with his charges now, orders Levitt to restrain the two teenagers. With no other option, she continues to comply. With both Suzie and Stacy now restrained, the man ties Sherrill's hands behind her back. What transpires over the next 24 hours is the substance of nightmares. Unspeakable acts take place behind closed doors before Stacy McCall Suzanne Streeter and Sherrill Levitt are killed one by one. Deep in rural Missouri, the spree killer buries his victims in the wilderness surrounding his property, where they remain to this day. The disappearance of Stacy McCall, Suzie Streeter, and Sherrill Levitt rocked the community of Springfield, Missouri. Missing persons posters blanketed the city in a matter of days, and the ever-present visual is a constant reminder of innocence lost. In 2002, investigators received a tip that the women's bodies were buried in the foundation of a parking garage at Cox Hospital. In 2007, crime reporter Kathy Baird invited Rick Norland, a mechanical engineer who had previously worked to find the deceased in the wreckage of the 9/11 tragedy, to scan a corner of the parking garage with ground-penetrating radar. Norland found 3 anomalies that he described as roughly the same size as a human body and consistent with a grave site location. Multiple donors, including Kathy Baird and Rick Norland themselves, have offered to pay for core sample analysis to determine whether the irregularities are human remains. The Springfield Police Department have declined all offers. Department spokesperson Lisa Cox said that the person who reported the initial tip provided no evidence or logical reasoning as to how or why the women were buried at this location. Additionally, construction of the parking garage began in September of 1993, over a year after the disappearance of the Springfield Three. As such, investigators do not believe the lead is credible. Suzie's brother and Sherrill's son, Bart Streeter, maintained a blog entitled Streeter Family Blog, where he would update the public with developments in the disappearance. In 2013, exhausted with the process, he turned over dominion of the blog to his daughter, Suzie's niece, and Sherrill's granddaughter, Dee Streeter. A $42,000 reward is being offered in this case. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And hey, just before I go, all I want for my birthday this year is for you to remember that you are a wonderful person who is capable of good. If you are struggling right now for any reason, just know that you are not alone and we are in this together. Think of the person you wanted to become when you were 7 or 8 years old. Do your best to be that person. Be kind to yourself and everyone else you come in contact with. I'm Brandon Smith, and I'll see you next time.